Hi everyone, it's Frank here. Glad you can join us for our season finale. So we're going to take you for a tour of the museum to show you all the really cool stuff we got in the last year. Been a really exciting year. We found lots of cool stuff, went to lots of neat mines, met some interesting people, and really like to thank all you guys for your support. We got just about 27,000 subscribers now, and we got some producers and stuff that in Los Angeles that are working with us to try to bring the show to some new platforms. So going forward in season 4, we got a brand new title. We've got that, we're working on that Antiochs documentary. We'll have that released next year. And so the first show next year will be on January 3rd, regular Thursday show release date. So join us for that. It's a really cool series coming up. We just went to some really nasty deep mines. It had me sitting on the edge of my seat while I was just editing it. It was pretty cool. So yeah, lots of cool stuff coming up. Then we're going to go to Mexico with a bunch of guys and go down some really deep shafts, do more rope work. Just lots of neat stuff coming up. So once again, really thank you for all the viewers, for your support. And we're going to do one more thing in this year, in 2018. We're going to have a live broadcast starting at 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Join us for that, and bring your favorite beverage. We'll have a drink or two, answer some questions. Hope to see you all there, and enjoy the holidays. And once again, thanks for all your support. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Alright, so we're getting ready to do our annual tour of the museum. I'm joined by Francois Desrochers, or we call him Frank. Well, there's two Franks now, I guess. And he's the cameraman. We're shooting this documentary there, so it's kind of a treat. We're going to go through a museum. We kind of go through it every year, and usually I kind of do it. But now we're going to hand the camera over to this professional cameraman, and we'll go through this all the stuff that we have here, and we'll just kind of show you what new stuff we've had in the last year. More stuff from Hamilton Powder Company that we hadn't had before, and we found some explosives from them. So you can see the polar, there's a lot of these polar boxes up at Antiochs, and they're not that old. This is 1940, and they're a little bit newer. From Powder Company, they're very rare. The Giant Powder Company is one of the first ones. This one says 1918 on it, so those are pretty old boxes. An air-powered chainsaw, it's a Remington chainsaw. They use them in mines lots because you can't run chainsaws in mines because of the smoke and the fumes, air pollution, so it's just air, compressed air. And they still use these today underground in some places, or underwater in some places, because you can just hook up compressed air. And if you're logging underwater doing salvage and stuff, you can use them. So they are still used. This is the dyno here, and it's actually pretty old. And what they do is when they had steam back in the old days, when they had steam, it's used to generate electricity. So especially on the trains and stuff, you see the old steam-powered trains, and you wonder how they got electricity. And it just turns the steam just turns this generator. This is actually a 13 kilowatt generator, so it's quite a bit of power. They probably use this at a sawmill or something, or maybe in a mine to light the mines. Some mines had lights all through the whole system. This cart here is actually a foundry cart they use inside of a foundry to move bricks of copper and stuff around. And we've got just a couple of drills. These aren't really old drills. They're probably back from about the 70s, just drills used in mine. I got piles of these drills. This we have a little foundry set up here, and back in the old days, the blacksmith used to make everything. So this here is a blower, so you just turn that, and all it does is they put a whole bunch of air in here, so you have your fire in here. You usually have coal and stuff, and then the blacksmith gets hot enough to melt the metal, and they pound everything. The interesting about this blacksmith, they moved around lots, and the only tool that they brought with them was just like a hammer. And then they just made all these tools. They're handmade tools, and these guys make stuff really fast, and there's like nothing to this. I mean, there's just a couple piece of rod. They just hammer it out there, and they're very skilled at forming the stuff, and they made all these little tools that they use to pick stuff up and to shape things. All these different types of tools. And here, this is the power line from inside the railways, inside the mines and stuff. They had electric locomotives. They didn't use gas engines hardly at all because they just didn't circulate to air. Back then they couldn't have the pollution, so they had big electric trains. And this is the power, so they just come along, and this is the positive part of it, and the rail is the negative part. So that charged the lines up. You see this, especially in Phoenix and Antioch, they had, just the big mines that had massive electric railways and stuff in them. And this is actually a counting board. It was from inside Phoenix. And when they dump the ore cars into lower bins and stuff, they keep track of how many loads. So they just have one for the 10s and one for the single ones, whatever. And keep track of how many loads. There's another one there from a tram. Same thing. They keep track. They always kept track of how many tons of ore they produced. That's how they paid a lot of the miners. And these guys here, this is a Pelican, so that's the same thing, but it's just for inside the cracks. If you have a small crack, it's a way of getting ore out of a small crack if you're snowing a vein or something like that. This is a more modern hangar for a railway, so it's got 2 power lines, so it's a lot safer than the one hot line, because then you don't have to worry about getting a shock. So that's what they do now. And yeah, so these are some of the bricks and stuff. They use bricks for a lot of different things. The refractory brick for hot stuff. This one here is kind of cool because it says Granby on it. They manufactured their own brick up at Antioch. They had big kilns there, and all the bricks are still in the kilns. Just common tools they used in the old days. They had a lot of these where they made their own nuts and bolts and stuff. So they were just square. So so that's all they had, just square tools to turn them, because they didn't have like today we got 6-sided bolts and nuts. They didn't have that back then. And the interesting is they're not very precise the way they're made. So they just have a long piece of flat bar and they just chop it off. Then they thread each nut, so everything's individually made. This is actually part of a tram tower, and you see it's at an angle. So different type of washers at angles, part of a tram tower. This is black powder. They also use that. And the reason they still use black powder is sometimes they're just a crack. They could just pour this dynamite into there, the black powder in there, and they just put a fuse in there. So then they wouldn't have to drill it. So they used it a little bit. It's kind of interesting. There's a spout where you actually are supposed to open it, but they just took a screwdriver and just opened it up. So you guys aren't very careful about stuff. They'd be pretty dangerous to just stick a screwdriver in a big keg of black powder like that. But Prospectors engine, and this engine here is a very old engine. It weighs 4,400 pounds, and it turns at only 500 RPMs, and it's only 17.5 horsepower. It's just got one big 7-inch piston, and this could run off a whole bunch of stuff. They had them all over the world. They're in India and everywhere else, use it for power generation. And usually you just fire them up and they could run off of peanut oil or crude oil or condensate or just about anything. This is a mucker, and they use these in mines where you're going up a raise at an angle, because railways only work when it's fairly flat. You only can't go down steep hills. And then they would just hook a winch up to it. So there's a big winch, and there's a cable there at the bottom and 2 at the top. So then the guy would just sit there and run the controls, and it would go up and down, and it would just scrape all the stuff in a big hole, and it would go straight down. It worked very good. You can move a lot of material. Just one guy just sitting with an air-powered winch in a day. 1911, and what's unique about this is it's not cooled by water at all. And they used them a long time ago, and it was made a lot of dust. They're just horrible machines. And it was a rail gun, so they put it in there, and as they started cranking this thing, it would go further into the face. And then they go as far as it can. It only go about 2 feet travel. Then you just pull it out, and then they put a 4-foot one and a longer one. So eventually they would drill in about 8 feet into the base. Into the face. Then you stuff all your dynamite in with a rod, put your caps on it, and then put some clay in it and seal it up, and then that's how you'd set the blasting up. This is a newer gun here. This one here has got, you see there's a hole in the end, and that's where the water comes out. And these are also replaceable drill bits, so you just unscrew them and put a new one on. So this would be like from the 70s. It's quite a bit newer. And the old type, they didn't have replaceable. They just had to keep sharpening. So they just throw these away and put new drill bits in. That's kind of how things are done in modern times. These are some of the old saws that they used It was a separate trade inside the mines, all the timbers to do all the ore chutes and everything. This one we got from Antioch. We found it at the bottom of the ocean. It was probably cast right in Antioch, and it was just tie up ships. Jim Crow, call it a Jim Crow, and it's used for bending track. You stick the track in there, then you tighten that up, and it'll bend the track. You notice in mines the tracks are very, very straight. They follow the deposits, goes back and forth, and that's how the miners bent the track. Now this guy here is a homemade Pelton wheel, and it generated electricity probably. Yeah, just two jets there. The water comes in there and spun there, and they probably had some kind of a generator or something on it. This guy here, well, this kind of a little newer, it's about from the 40s. It's a mucker, and the way it works, I'll get on the other side of it maybe. Here's the controls for it. So they use this when they're building tunnels inside the mines. So you'd imagine there'd be a face there. So they drill it with this machine. They drill the tunnel out there. Then they blast it. Then you got a big pile of rock there. So this machine here would load the rock up into a car like that. So it just has two controls. This is air powered. This completely air powered machine, and it would just have a big air line going in the mine and it's hooked up to a hose. So this is the drive motor. So you go. Let's see how it works now. So it's a little stiff, but so when you push this, it go ahead, and then you could take this and it would drop the bucket down. It would go screaming ahead, and then you could lift this up and it would go very fast and it would just go up. And then you bring the whole machine, you just move it back there, and it would go dump it in there really fast and just go ahead and go. And then it goes up and it goes like that, and it moves very fast. This thing's pretty dangerous. I mean, if you get the hand or anything stuck in there, just take it right off. I've seen videos of these operating. They still use them in South America, and they actually still make the parts for this. So you don't see them in Canada much, but in third world countries they would still use something like this. They're very common. There's lots of these. I've seen probably 5 underground like this, so they're not uncommon. And this is a pretty fair sized car. It would be pulled by a locomotive. The mucker would load it, and it's just side of the car. And they just tip over the side. And so they probably have to hook a chain or something on it, and maybe a winch or something to tip it. I don't think you'd be able to tip it by hand. The newer invention that they have now, they have something called a Granby car. So basically, just have 2 big wheels on the side, and then they have a big ramp here. So as the car comes along, the wheels would ride up on it and would just tip itself and just come along slowly. And they still use them, the Granby car. That's something they invented here in Grand Forks and is still used all over the world. This is an air-powered locomotive. So there's 2 kinds of locomotives they use. The electric is more common than the air-powered one. But this one normally have a great big huge tank on it. And every time they go in the mine, they'd have to lift the tank up. And this is a 5-cylinder EMCO motor, air-powered motor, and it's the same motor that's in the mucker. So it's the same company and the same motor. So, and there's quite a few of these around. Air power is not a very efficient way to drive a motor, but it does work. So, and this cart here is kind of an interesting story. This is a very old cart, and this would have been pulled by mules up at Phoenix before they invented the more modern metal type carts. So when they first started mining up at Phoenix, they didn't have any railways or anything. They got all these parts, these axles and all these metal parts, and then they just made everything out of wood because it was cheaper, and they just didn't have the transportation to get to make the metal cars. So just kind of a real crude cart. We see quite a few of them up at Phoenix because they just abandoned them when they built better carts. They're very high maintenance carts. They fell apart all the time, and they're difficult to keep them going. They didn't have wheel bearings. You just poured oil into reservoirs, and the oil come out of there. And nothing's welded on. It was a pretty old cart. So this one, I took all the metal pieces off of an old cart that was all rotted, and then I did a bunch of drawings, and then you saw it all brand new wood. So it's like a brand new cart that's actually 120 years old. So this is about the Granby cart. So he says, do not stand on a dump wheel side when trains are passing. So those wheels, like if this is a Granby cart, the wheels stick out quite a long ways. So if the workers are walking on this thing, they can get caught by those wheels because they stick out. So they always have to walk on the part on the side where there's no wheels if you're walking alongside the train. And the trains they're not really that loud when you go in there because they're electric, whatever. They don't make a lot of noise, and if there's drilling and stuff going in the mine, you can get run over by a train pretty quick. So they got some signs about the trains and stuff. It's loud in there, and you step out somewhere, and you can get hit by a train underground. So this here is a steam boiler. It's not very big, but there's a gauge for it. But This thing actually weighs about 4,000 pounds, and they just have a big fire in a boiler, and then they put water in it and make steam, and that's what they use it to run different kinds of motors and stuff. And they had all kinds of steam boilers everywhere. They're very dangerous because they're fairly thin tubes and they blew up lots, and steam, you know, it's got a huge amount of pressure when it's like a big spring. Steam is like a big spring. It run up like to 2,000 pounds per square inch or something and make a lot of damage if it ruptured. A lot of people were killed by boilers in the old days. These are timbers that they use in the railways and the mines, so just the ties for the timbers. So they just have these flat cars, they just pull behind the, just a flat deck car. From the Great Northern Railroad, so it was a big railroad, but it's just kind of cool, and you know, it's just a switch to switch to track. This is actually what they would use inside the mine, just a small little thing like that. An advantage of that is it's flush, it hides right out of the way to move it back and forth. This here is my famous cart, and we call this Tippy. And this cart is beautiful condition. It's like almost brand new. We found inside the mine. It's part of the clock. And this is just a small cart that they wouldn't use for a locomotive wouldn't pull this. It's just kind of like a wheelbarrow inside of a higher level of the mine to transfer ore down. And what's the cool thing about this cart is you can do the latch. You can swing it. So if there's an ore pit, so you can dump it in any direction. So this is a heck of a time getting this out of off the bottom. Took a lot of beer to get this thing in the truck. It's all riveted. Arc welding wasn't common until around 1920, so anything before that was riveted. And then this axle for this cart also doesn't have any wheel bearings. So you see there's a hole there, so they just pour oil, or they have oilers and they just pour oil in there. And there's the axle, so there's nothing very sophisticated about that. So, you know, so that's kind of like an older version of that cart. We'd use this in a shaft, so it's very hard to run. It's got a gas-powered motor in it, but it doesn't really have a clutch. So the way it worked is you just kind of kick the dogs out when it wasn't under pressure, and then you could put it back in. So it was difficult to operate, but they would use that to pull buckets up and down on winds, or a shaft to bring it up. There's bigger ones than that, but it's a pretty cool winch nevertheless. It's like a 5 and a 7 horsepower engine. And this is how you started it. You cranked it over. They're just a single cylinder diesel engines that they used. They used it in an assay office. I think what they did is they had a predetermined size of a box or something like that, and then they weighed it, and then they would know what the density of it is, and then that would help them determine maybe how rich the ore was, or what, or not really sure how it worked, but it was for mining and smelting for the assay office. Kind of cool. This is a spittoon they had in the old hotels. They had spittoons everywhere. People spit everywhere. And there's this sign here that says, was inside the HP mine. It says, no spitting allowed on lunchroom floor. This is all stuff that actually came from Mexico. So there was this is a really old light. It's a really cool light. You can hook it on a timber or something like that. And we got that in Mexico. And these are just some of the different minerals and rocks. And that's a fossil and just different crystals that we found in Mexico. And some of the bottles and stuff. And I really only keep the embossed bottles. There's so many bottles around. That's kind of cool with the writing on them. And this is I got this from Gary Trent, and it's just a whole bunch of really old locomotives from all over the world. They made locomotives everywhere, steam locomotives. Every country had their own. This is a gas-powered drill, and it was used by prospectors. If you're out there doing some prospecting and you're interested in some areas, you go in there and you just drill some holes and stick some dynamite in there and blow it up there and examine some rock and stuff. So it's gas-powered, so they would never use it in mine because it'd be smokier than hell. And this is some stuff from the 70s. Here's some different types of rod they use when they drill the holes in and they stick the dynamite. They drill the holes, they stick the dynamite, and they just use that, stuff that dynamite in, get it in there as compact as you want, because you don't want any air in there because it reduces the efficiency of the dynamite. So that's those tamping rods they use in the mines. You see quite a few of them in the mines. This is an old blasting machine, and it's just a charge generator. So you just hook it up to the electric blasting caps and gives it a shot. 70s for doing logging roads and stuff like that. So it's kind of really cool because you can just wheel it right up to where you're going to go, and then if you turn this, there's a big screw here, so this whole gun pushes into the face. So you just sit here and drill it, and you just you block the wheels up or whatever, and then you run the drill, and it just slowly goes into the face, and then when you're done, just pull it away. So it's a lot easier than to try to lift anything heavy. So you've got swivels into place where we want it. It was made for drilling rock. And this guy here is an old compressor, and it was last used in the Midnight Mine in 1915. So it has a Buddha 4-cylinder gas engine in it. It's really old. And it's seized up, so it doesn't turn anymore. We put a bunch of oil, we're trying to get it. I don't know if it'll ever run, but I'm not sure what's seized up. It's either the compressor or the engine, I'm not sure, they're coupled together. 17 horsepower engine would be enough to run this. It's a belt drum, so you just have a belt that this thing runs. And the way it works is you open these doors up, and you stick a bunch of these steel balls and the ore in there, and then it goes around and it makes it a hell of a racket. And it just grinds the ore up into really fine powder. And that's how you get the gold out of it and the minerals and stuff. So this is a pretty small one. It must have been for a really rich deposit, or maybe just for doing sampling. So the way they get the gold out of it, they pound the ore into just a real fine powder, and then they make a froth out of it, blow some bubbles, put some chemicals in it, and then they skim the bubbles off because gold sticks to the chemicals, and that's how they concentrate part of the process. And they also, there's different ways to use cyanide, mercury, there's different ways of doing it, but the one way is you definitely have to pound the rock into powder, basically, to get the gold out. This is the drum of mercury, so it's a very heavy drum. Well, mercury is very heavy, so that's how they transport mercury in the old days. And there we have another winch there we used in a shaft. This is a pretty old one, would have had a motor hooked up to it. Quite a bit older than the other one, and so they would add just a head frame and the pulley, and then they use these ore buckets if they're going down a shaft. An advantage of these is, so you got the cable up there, so you just undo this latch, and then you can tip that bucket, you know, with still having the weight on it, so this is pretty simple technology. And there's a smaller one, and this one here is actually for tools. So they just have beside a manway, you'll see a trough. And then just stick their tools and their dynamite or whatever up there and haul it up to higher. That's called a skip. They're just to haul stuff up in the higher levels of the mines. This guy here is a air-powered pump. So it's a water pump that they use to pump the areas out, and they use compressed air to pump that. Now this is a really old shaft bucket because it's all made out of wood. And this is a pelter wheel. They use that to generate electricity. You know, they down the river somewhere and get it down to a real fine nozzle, and it would spin a big generator. So we have a track bucket here, and you see it. It rides up on a cable, a great big huge cable, about 1.5 inch cable up there. It rides along there, and then the power line is actually hooked onto here. So most of these were gravity trams, so they just have a big. So they just have 2 buckets. So the one at the top is loaded. The weight from the top one releases and it goes down and brings the empty one up, and it just goes back and forth. It doesn't need any power, and it just has a guy that works at the very top that runs a brake, because otherwise it'll come screaming right to the top of the shaft there. Now these came from Antioch, and these are ladles. In the smelter, just take out copper samples out of the molten copper samples. They can scoop some sop out of there. And this was actually part of the spillway where the slag comes down. They made this out of this special type of rock. I don't know how it is. And then the slag comes pouring down out of it looks like big fingers of lava coming out of there. It was pretty cool, actually. So at night or something, it'd be pretty neat to see it. And there's some just other rocks and minerals and stuff like that. We found some really cool deposits of this stuff, and this is galena, so it's lead, silver, and zinc that's all mixed together, and that's what they would have mined a lot of in the slow can. And there's some serpentinite, my favorite rock. So we've got some bigger chunks of galena. This stuff's really heavy. That's a bigger chunk there. And what else do we have here? Just a lot of it's just pyrites and stuff. You know, anytime you see something like this, you know, think, oh, it's gold, but there's no gold in that. It's just pyrite. It doesn't weigh anything. Fool's gold. Quartzes. This is a really old machine, and they use it in the assayer's office, and it's just belt driven, and it just grinds ore up, and then it just comes out, and then they figure out how much gold or how much is in it. There's some old guns here. Just more bottles. You got piles of bottles. Carbide used to come in these containers. These are carbide containers for carbide lamps. We'll show you a carbide lamp. It's on the other side here. we're fooling around with it. There's another. This is a wheel from a wheelbarrow. This is a wheelbarrow wheel. They used to use them in mines a lot, just steel wheels like that. They're just real kind of simple. Another carbide container and different spikes. You have different gauges of railway depending on how big the carts were, from smaller ones to bigger ones. And these some of these carbide lamps. We were fooling around with them the other day to try to get one going. And the way they work is you just pour the water in the top part, drips into here, the bottom part, and then it makes a settling gas, and then it comes out, and then you light it. And here's a stick of dynamite that we got from the Granby company. This is Granby on it. Somewhere, you can't read it very well. From 1918. It's a giant powder company. There's just sawdust in there. There's no dynamite in there anymore. Oh, there it is. I think you can see this one better. It's a CIL Granby. Yeah. So they must have bought a lot of Granby because they had Granby company right on the dynamite. So these are some really cool rocks or crystals there that we found. These are quartz crystals. And we found a big deposit of them up at the silver, up at Trout Lake, up at the silver. This is another type of crystal, but this one's a calcite crystal. It's very soft. Some calcium, and that's quartz. So this is actually a 9 in the hardness scale, and this is a 3. This is very soft, but they look similar. A lot of people can mistake sometimes calcite for quartz, or two different things. And these are just some of the different lights and stuff. The first light they come up with is just a candle that they had and just stuffed it in there. It was called a Tommy stick. And then they went to this teapot, so then you just put diesel or something in there, and they had a wick, and then put them on these old miners' hats. Eventually they were just made out of cloth. They're just kind of a cheap hat like that. And then it went to electric, and the batteries. And today we have really small, powerful batteries. Back in the carbide lamps get very little light. They weren't very good at all. And these are some of the different types of blasting caps. We got the electric caps, and you'll see the numbers on them. That's the delay in milliseconds, because they don't blast all at the same time. It's kind of a wave. And then the other type is the fuse type of blasting cap that they have. And here we have a shaft bell from a hoist. And there's kind of a real code. That's how it's written. It's standard on all mines, exactly the same. So if you want the hoist, it's like an elevator, right? So if you want the hoist to go to a certain level, you have to read the thing and how many bells, whatever, and he sends it up there. There's a whole procedure set up for that. And it's the same in every mine. So if a miner goes from one to another, it's the exact same protocol to operate the hoist in the different mines. And these are some of the light bulbs used to be very valuable. They had to hand blow them. So these are, you can see this light bulb here. It's got kind of a tit on the end. And that's because they were hand blown light bulbs. They were worth quite a lot of money back then. And up at Antioch, they had a problem that the miners used to steal them and take them to their house all the time because the company didn't provide light bulbs. So they ordered a whole bunch of stolen on them. So the miners wouldn't steal them, but they didn't really stop them from stealing them. They didn't care. They just kind of laughed about it. Some of them actually just took sandpaper and ground the stolen off of there. But we've never been able to find one that said stolen. So. And so we have some mine telephones. This is a big transformer. It's kind of interesting how it tripped. I can't remember now. But yeah, this is a big, huge transformer that was used in I think a compressor or something from a long time ago. These are explosion-proof phone inside of a mine. The Edison phone, actually a pretty old phone. And the way these worked is they generate the electricity and then run the phones. So use them in lines and stuff. Lots to usually have phones in a few different locations, around the hoist and different machine shops. It's got all these crystals in it, and broke this off of a big face. That's pretty cool. A few new things in our mine, in our museum this year. We try to kind of update what we have.